Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
I'll just adjust the height, all right? There we go. Brilliant. Okay. Comedy gold. Right. Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Alistair Richardson. I work at the university here. Vicky and I are one person as the faculty heads of research for the Faculty of Education. Very welcome here. I know for some people it's your first time at the university, so welcome, and I hope you had a chance to have a look around. We'll take the laptop round with us later so you can have a proper look. But welcome to tonight's event, tonight's book launch, hosted between the Institute of Education at the university here, the Centre for Professional Learning in Education, which is our knowledge exchange centre, and also the IPPE, as you can see on the banner over there. There's a banner over there. ITE, Initial Teacher Education, is obviously fundamental to what we do here at the university. And I was thinking we just had a department meeting, I was thinking earlier about how when I started here, we were always told that we are about ITE rather than ITT. That there was just that subtle language shift, that we weren't about training people, we were about initial education, and that was something that would then become a lifelong and career-long process. And as a result of that, I've always said to my trainees that we're not training you to be a teacher, we are training you in teaching, and that will be a lifelong process, a career-long process. You'll never reach a point where you know everything there is to know about teaching. So I think it's really timely that this evening we're coming together and thinking about and celebrating another collection of research and pieces of writing that add to the field of physical education particularly, and that we think of it, all of us here are invested in some way in research and in the ongoing development of our subject. And I say our subject as someone who has nothing to do with PE now, but has been a PE subject lead at some point in the distant past. So I think it's really important, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all the different contributions that we have this evening as well. So you're all very welcome. There's plenty of food and things to drink and nibble at the back. Sorry. So please do help yourself as we go on. A couple of notices as well, just to let you know, if you do want to use any of the toilets, they are right on the ground floor. So just come out and turn around and downstairs. We're not expecting a fire alarm unless Vicky's timed one particularly. But if we do, then we will just head outside of the building. But please do enjoy your evening. I'm going to hand over to Gerald to start us off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
Now I'm not as tall, so we're going to have to work something out here. We're going to do this on a lectern. Unfortunately, we realised that the spot where the camera hits is here, so it's going to be a little bit more improvised, but bear with me. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I would normally do this without notes, but it's one of these kind of evenings where there's a few key things I want to say and a few kind of thank yous, and I don't want to miss, so just indulge me a little bit of a script. So let's start by saying a few thank yous. Firstly to Alistair and the University of Winchester for hosting us in the event this afternoon. Secondly, for all of you for coming, supporting the book launch. And thirdly, to colleagues at Routledge, especially Simon Whitmore, for continuing to commission texts in our field, including this one, which I'm proud to say is now my fourth with Routledge, but perhaps hopefully not the last. For the purposes of the speech, some of you will be glad to know that the history of texts in primary physical education is a short one. While isolated examples can be identified before the millennium, a glut of texts appeared in the 1999 to 2001 period with the reworking of the national curriculum. While these texts made a much needed contribution because of the lack of authors publishing in the field at the time, many chapters were written by those specialising in particular disciplines like physical activity and health or sports science. But the problem with some of the chapters is they made little or no reference to the age of the child involved with any particular needs. Consequently, such chapters were discarded by teachers, researchers and students alike, with only key chapters held as kind of usable kind of piecemeal collection that they dipped into here and there. The text that changed everything was Teaching Physical Education in the Primary School, a developmental approach. Published in 2007 by Ian Pickup and Laurie Price, it set the bar for a subject-specific text written by and for primary physical education professionals that was both accessible and usable. And for those of us looking to get our voices heard in primary PE at the time, it inspired us and it showed us the way. I began conversations with Routledge in the years that followed, but it was clear there were further books that we needed on our shelves that just at the time didn't exist. Quotes like, "I just need a good chapter on this topic or that topic," became an all too common phrase in our classrooms and in our offices, and certainly sparked some of the conversations that myself and Gavin would have had back at the time. I was at the time offered the opportunity by Routledge to write the first edition, but I remain convinced that a better solution would lead to would be an edited text that would lead to contributions from the leading emerging authors at the time. That would surely be the best text for everybody. I just had to back myself and convince all those people around me that they wanted to do that as well. In 2009, the proposal was developed and the writing team was assembled before being finally agreed in 2010. The first edition was published in 2012, which included contributions from the previously mentioned Ian Pickup and Laurie Price, as well as a dozen more primary physical education specialists. A decade on, the first text of Introduction to Primary Physical Education has remained a staple on university reading lists across the world and has prompted the kind invitation from Routledge to write the second edition. But what next and where next? The task to write the second edition actually proved more daunting at first than expected. I'd not appreciated that I was too close to the first text. Even many years on, lacked the perspective that I was so clear about the first time. It was at this point I turned to Vicky. We'd been writing together for a little while, but it was clear to me, even in a short time, that as a pair we were an excellent complement to each other. I asked Vicky if she could provide me with a critical evaluation of the first edition, a text that I knew she'd regularly been using in her own academic work, and most importantly with her students. It was clear at this point she was capable of being very critical of the first text. But from the conversation that emerged, it was obvious that together we had a vision for a text that would not only build on the foundations of the first edition, but also a vision that would develop that work further and involve more, even louder, even stronger voices in the field of primary physical education. So it's with great pride that we launched the second edition here today. And I'd like to end in the same way that I began, with some thank yous. Firstly, to the 21 authors who agreed this time to contribute their valuable time and energy into the project. Secondly, and specifically, Ian Pickup, Mike Jess, Gavin Ward, Nelda Wainwright, Richard Metcalf, and Christy Howells, because you contributed both to the first text and the second text. And how I didn't put you off the first time, I'm not sure, but thanks for sticking with me. And lastly, to Dr. Randall, Vicky, my very talented professional colleague and friend who's helped make this text possible. Thank you. And now you can come up and tell these good people all about it. Thank you very much.
I might have to move the screen down a little bit more. Emmerich, I can see you're laughing. Okie dokie. Thank you, Jez. I've also prepared a few words on here as well, because Jez organised his speech beforehand. And I thought, oh, blimey, I'd better do the same. So just to echo Jez's thanks to everyone for coming tonight. This is the first sort of face-to-face event we've done in a couple of years, certainly within the sort of, I know Jodie and I have tried, you know, we've got some things going within the county doing some face-to-face, but this felt like a real milestone in moving kind of professional development and conversations further after the COVID pandemic, although we're still very much in it. And we just wanted to get that ball rolling again. So thank you for supporting us and having that confidence to come this evening. This really does mean a lot to see so many old and new faces, and in addition to the wider professional community, who we've received such wonderful messages and emails and social media comments over the last few weeks about the book. We've been overwhelmed by the level of interest, and it's kind of really made the last few years really worthwhile. If I can take you back though to an autumn semester day in 2015 at Edinburgh University. This was the first time I met Gerald face to face. Well, actually, we had met in the summer, but he doesn't remember that, so we'll just forget that happened. We were there to launch the first meeting of the European Primary Physical Education Network, or EPEN, as we have now come to know it. Following a successful symposium with Mike Jess, Nicola Cast and Jean Key, who was one of my doctoral supervisors at the time, and myself, and we just delivered at the ICEP Congress in Madrid. The purpose of which was to begin a positive change in direction for primary physical education. Little did I know at the time that journey I would go on following that meeting and that event, and how instrumental Jez would be to that journey. Starting with a small matter of getting an Ed.D. Viva over and an examination, which him and the wonderful Maura, who's joined us tonight, were with us, and I can't thank them both enough for that very rigorous experience. But 7 years later, we have celebrated a number of collaborations together, including academic papers, book chapters, all-party parliamentary report contributions. Just before the pandemic started, we co-founded the Primary PE Assembly in 2020, and of course now the second edition of An Introduction to Primary PE. This has all been part of a bigger effort to ensure primary physical education is recognised as an academic discipline in its own right, with strong advocacy and positioning in primary education curriculum. And I think collectively, with my colleagues here included tonight, I think we're starting to make some waves. Both Jez and Maura have supported me tremendously over those years. Thank you to you both. But Jez, you've been an invaluable mentor, colleague, and most importantly, friend, and I am truly indebted to you for that. But on to the book. As Jez has already mentioned, the 2007 Pick Up and Price book was a bit of a game changer in the primary PE world, especially for initial teacher education. And it was at this time I started to make the move into higher education and teacher education. I was fortunate to work with Ian Pickup, Laurie Price, Jean Key, Dominic Hayden Davis, Emeric Catel, Judy Shaughnessy, contributors to both the first and second editions of this book at Roehampton University. And it was at Roehampton I got a real education about what primary PE is, or what it should be. But there was a lot of work to do, and Emeric, I don't know if you recall, we used to call it the 20-year plan, but we felt like we were starting in year one every year. The first edition of Introduction to Primary PE came along in 2012 with so many of my Roehampton colleagues involved. Between Jez's text and Pick Up and Price's text, I learnt my trade and established my own philosophy for primary PE. And it was at this point I moved to Winchester. But this was over a decade ago, so much has happened in the world of primary PE since then, not least of all an Olympic and Paralympic Games in London, a subsequent investment of £2.4 billion into the subject at primary level, a change in the national curriculum, a change to initial teacher education provision, a proliferation of the primary PE workforce, a global pandemic, and the undercurrent to all of this, increasing concerns over children's physical health and mental health. The challenge, as Jez has already outlined, how to write a revised text for the first edition that would retain the principles of the first, building upon the voices in that text while also addressing the significant changes that have impacted the subject since 2012. We've therefore added new chapters into this book, while cutting none, as it says, which was a strong decision to make, but we felt that they were still relevant as ever. These new chapters address the wider subject workforce, stakeholder engagement in primary PE, subject leadership, and transition into primary PE through the early years and primary years into secondary. So tonight you're going to hear from a few of our authors. They collectively blend the old values and principles of the first with the new landscape for primary PE. Their voices are very much valued and respected in primary education in their own right, and we have been incredibly fortunate, as with all our authors, that they've committed to this project amidst the pandemic, national lockdowns and other challenges that it has brought. And from that note, just a personal thanks to my friends and colleagues and James, because undertaking this project during a pandemic lockdown while having a baby was something that was not the easiest of things to achieve, but without their help it certainly wouldn't have been done. So to kick us off, we have, I think if we can, Gavin, start with you, with the laptops in this angle, is that okay? Just to say a few words, and then we'll follow with Maura, who have completely reframed with Deirdre, who I know couldn't be with us tonight, but her wonderful co-author on the chapter of possibilities and challenges for primary PE, followed by Christy, who wrote the chapter on placing an importance on health and physical activity in both editions, and Alison and Emeric on a completely different look at gymnastics from their chapter, Educational Gymnastics, Embodiment of a Constraint Agility Approach. After all our authors have spoken, we are going to invite you to ask any questions if you might have them, but we'll try and turn the recording off there. We'll see how that goes. And this can be about primary PE, the book, primary PE in general, or just primary education in general, whatever you think would be a useful question to ask us all. So without further ado, Gavin, shall I hand over to you? Thank you.
Shall I walk like this?
Oh man.
Is that right? Does that work right?
We haven't thrown this
Just
way.
Stand at the back.
Look at that.
Oh dear.
Not with the heightest in this room. I noticed some of you got some kit on, so I brought some balls and bibs and I'm about to go and play a game out there. Is that okay? That's going to be my talk. No, you're not.
No mention of beanbags.
You just did.
I've worked with him, he does do this.
So I started teaching in secondary education and I got to work in primary education too. And when I started out, predictably, I taught PE and geography. They were the combination in those days. And 3 years in, I think it was, into my first job, when I thought I knew everything, we had an advisor come and work with the geography department, and he said to me, "Right, Gavin, can you articulate to me what it is you think geography teaches children in relation to thinking?" And I was really stumped, and I kind of mumbled some sort of answer about physical and human geography. And I soon learned that the right answer was about patterns and processes. And this is the approach I've taken in the games chapter. So what I've taken is sports. We see sports out there on the telly, and I've taken some that can be grouped as games and looked at the patterns and processes, the rules in those games and how they create particular tactical problems. And then also looked at the skillfulness and combination of skillfulness that can create these solutions to these tactical problems. And in doing so, what I want to try and provide is sort of a conceptual framework and a toolkit to be able to pick apart those sports, to provide accessibility of gameplay to all pupils. And that's really important, that, you know, whatever you expose to in your home life, in your community life, in your school life, a lot of children have different experiences of games. And what we should be doing is providing opportunity for everyone to access gameplay, and that's really important for me in the chapter for name. And so in this chapter, this re-edition of this chapter, I've really looked at how the local conditions can really affect the skillfulness of gameplay. So how things like surfaces and walls and size of spaces and how they interact can impact on the decision making, the timing, and the technique of being skillful. And what I'm trying to encourage practitioners to do is move away from throwing children into full-on games that look like sport, that are fully complex and ever-changing, don't have that stability to be able to make connections, and rather move to this idea of creating modified games. So games that have sufficient tension, that is, there's buy-in from both sets of players. They see this fairness, they see this value in this, they want to commit to this. This is a game worth me committing to. So that's the tension, but also balances, importantly, the weighting and this time and space to be skillful and make the connections with tactical solutions. And I think I'd admit, and I think it's really important to admit, that teaching games is complex, it's challenging, they're forever changing. And that's what makes them really inherently interesting to watch. We like watching games and playing them, but importantly, teaching them it's quite difficult to wade through that complexity. And really to move towards, for me, it's about using these toolkits to try and create opportunities for children to make those connections. And in my work with undergraduate students now, and as a volunteer coach with school-aged children, I often make mistakes, and there's often times when things don't go right. So you have a plan about the sort of game you want to put into practice and the local conditions, because they're always different. Different players, different levels of motivation, different day, different physical conditions. Maybe you're missing a bit of equipment that you need, and that can create a game that doesn't quite work. And that often works for me as a coach and as a higher education teacher. And it's that interrelationship. So it's like having that plan and then adapting what you've got, the environment, to try and bring the focus back on that skillfulness and that connection to the tactical solution that you're trying to get. And it's likewise also when I'm doing stuff, sometimes you have these sort of eureka moments where you didn't think it was going to work, or it was going to work in a particular way and it works another way, and you think, oh, I'm going to bag that works really well to get this done. And so it's that always continuous learning and growing in a knowledge, and I'm constantly doing it. I'm still adding to what I know about teaching games now, and I don't think I ever will get to a point where I think, yeah, I'm done. But despite this complexity, the principles, patterns and process that exists can help you cut through that and to try and create a space in which you can create the stability to develop learning for young people, but also that excitement that draws them into playing games. So I'd like to thank you both for the opportunity to contribute again to the edition of the book. I didn't realise in such select numbers about how many of, I haven't sat and looked at both of them together. I didn't realise only a few of us who managed to make it through the second edition, so I'm really pleased to have done that. So thank you both, and also for your work as editors. And I haven't had an opportunity to do this, Jez, but I'd like to say a particular thank you to you publicly. You disappeared when I got my PhD and all that, so we didn't get a chance to talk about that. But you're the one who said to me when I first got into higher education back in 2009, 2010, to put my ideas down on paper. And that was in Prac 2, teaching games. And that was the start of my PhD journey. And that's the start of the games chapter and my understanding about how to conceptualize teaching games. And that's led on to other research and scholarship and the insights that provides and helps me develop my work with undergraduate and postgraduate students. So thank you very much. It was really appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. I'm not going to say Gavin's chapter was a beast of a chapter to edit, so it is, but it does highlight the area, we were talking about this earlier, the game of curriculum, where we, I think we feel we have most confidence as physical education practitioners, but actually, you know, I certainly speak to schools and they say, oh, I need more gymnastics, I need more dance support. But and the games gets overlooked quite often. So I think there was almost a greater need for unpicking games in a contemporary way now more than ever, because it can get overlooked in that professional learning culture. So he wrote a lot, yeah. Thank you, Gavin. Okay, I'm just going to turn around Maura. Oh, sorry, you have my forehead then, folks. Apologies. I'm going to turn around so you can see our lovely group here tonight. And then if I can hand over to Maura, is that okay? Let's see if this works. I'm hoping. Yes, possibly. No, they can see your face too. That's okay.
That's not what I was asking.
There we go.
There's more audience.
Is that okay, guys? Is that like okay?
It's lovely.
Oh, I need to turn the volume up.
Can you hear me okay there, Vicky?
I'm just putting the volume up as loud as it will go. I think we'll be good, Maura, yeah.
Okie doke. Do you want me to?
Oh, it's a bit quiet, isn't it? Maybe it's because I've... Try again?
Do you want me to start now, or is that okay?
We have some techie people in the room, Maura.
Oh, I think just plug me into the main speakers, I think.
We'll, look here. Emma, you're always so helpful.
I can't actually get it to
Go
respond.
top up your glasses and things.
Oh, look, here we are.
Sorry, Jan.
Meeting options.
Can we get James's knees? James's knees, yes. James's knees. The Dean needs some help with the knees, James. He's talking about the knees.
Okay, so you hear better?
Could you speak again?
Oh, okay, yeah, that worked. Oh, no, just get quiet for a sec.
Should I just give somebody a heart attack?
All of us. Okay, I think
I'll leave the justice.
Jez,
I've got no eardrums, Maura.
Sorry, Jez.
Jez is now wishing he'd moved off. Okay, we're just 30 seconds or so while people
It's
fill up
okay.
their glasses more, and we all get our heart back into our stomachs back in to where they should be. We didn't put the volume. Yes. There we go. Oh my goodness, that was loud.
Okay, so I know we have a long agenda tonight, Vicky, of people to get through, so I'll just kick off while people are still getting their drinks and nibbles and stuff. So just to start off to say thank you so much to Jez and Vicky for inviting us to contribute to this edition of the book. We were delighted to be part of the motley crew of amazing authors. And of course, to thank my co-author Deirdre, who may pop in later on for the Q&A. I think she's undertaking a PhD examination. She's examining somebody at the moment. So she just wishes everybody luck tonight, and thanks everybody for coming along as well to support Jez and Vicky and all of us authors tonight. So thank you for that. Just to give you an overview of the chapter, though I know every single one of you have read the book from cover to cover and have it underlined and highlighted and tabbed and everything and ordered for all your libraries. Christmas presents are sorted for next year, the whole lot. But just in case you've been so busy reading Ali and the other people's chapters, she's very anxious about the gymnastics chapter, that I'll just give you a quick overview of the chapter and how it came about, where it came from. So the core idea for the chapter came from one of Michael and a keynote address he gave in Edinburgh in 2018. So Mike and Nicola, I think, have a lot of input in different chapters here, getting people together for different reasons. So Michael, pronounced correctly, he asserted that a reasonable aim for physical education is more physical education in which different ways of being in the world as somebody are both possible and encouraged. So now we do realise the teaching is complex, but we've proposed 4 possibilities in the chapter for primary PE, and what we wanted really was to challenge the reader to consider the why of the physical education they taught, within that wider context of educational context and the purpose of physical education, looking at what Michael talked about. So we kind of get 4 possibilities. And you'll see other people's work coming through here as well as Michael's overall overarching aim for what PE should be. So the first one is around PE as a hub, or physical education as a hub for all physical activity engagement. And while we don't refer to the contribution of physical education as, just to clarify, as vigorous physical activity and the recommendations for physical activity, it's really more about physical education as an opportunity as a connector to children's physical activity experiences within and beyond school. And through the PE lessons, these connections need to be highlighting and linking what happens through the school curriculum and beyond the school gates, really to influence and impact children's lifelong and life-wide physical activity. So being active in different spaces and contexts with different people and for different purposes opens up the potential for lots of different ways of engaging. And by acting as a hub, physical education helps children and can help children make sense of these different ways of being and being at one with their own physical activity identity. And now, of course, rebranding physical education as a physical activity hub or a participatory activity hub is not without challenges. And we really do need to defend that core position of physical education within the curriculum space. Also, as it demands work with others, such as coaches and providers and parents and principals and lots of other stakeholders, we still need to ensure that the core identity of the teacher in the classroom as the key decision maker is protected, and that they are charged with that role of coordinating and managing physical education for the child in their care in their class. So that was possibility 1. Possibility 2 is prioritizing the physical in primary physical education. And of course, that's what makes our subject so different and distinct from others, is it's our sense of using it and our sense of play and using that to our strengths. And for many, primary schools represent a crucial window to learn physical skills and fundamental movement skills, without which future access and participation in physical activity or sport can be inhibited. So aligning again with Michael's argument, we should include and have more emphasis on the physical, the P in physical education. And it seems very logical that physical education spaces promote the practice and celebration of that physical skillfulness and achievement by children and for children. But again, a little bit of challenge with this, we need to ensure that the P and the E are balanced. More physical or more P is great, but what about the E? Should it be compromised? And again, we ask the reader to consider this and think of this and look at their own positionality within what they do and why they do it. Moving on then quickly to the third possibility is prioritizing personal meaningfulness in primary physical education. And here we hold that if the child does not place value and significance on an experience, more than likely they're going to avoid it, or what they might do is they might look for it again, they might want to engage in it again or in the future. So we really advocate to listen and accommodate the child's voice and to pay attention to their experience. And this should result in more children finding physical education experiences significant for themselves because they're part of that co-construction with the teacher. Involving the children can emphasize the E a little bit further, the education part of physical education, and attention then is given to the quality of the experience and inevitably affects the quality of learning in turn. And again, for some teachers, they might find this very alien, having to listen to 30 different versions of what they might want to do in a PE class. And whether do they run simultaneously? Is that desirable? And is it practical? Can you offer what every child wants? But what we need to do is consider that that focus on meaningfulness should be understood and should be taken in the hands of a very sensitive teacher. And that teacher provides a lens for the child to learn about themselves, the others around them, and promote qualities such as empathy and respect for difference and plurality as well within that. And again, something that's really coming out more recently through the pandemic, through the current issues we're having in Europe, with the Ukraine, with climate change, with sustainability, is physical education. This is possibility 4. Is physical education there for something bigger than physical education? So is it beyond physical education? And we've kind of chosen climate change as a threat and a crisis faced by our planet. And we're saying, can physical education play a role in addressing this problem? And do we have an ethical obligation to prioritize this purpose over the others, given where we are in the world today? So again, Alan Ovens has done a lot of work in this area, and we sought out and looked to Alan and his work to inform what we might propose in this section. And we've given the readers, again, some, as part of the book, I'm sure Vicky will talk about this later, is to propose some readings that can bring the reader to further areas and further things that they can, you know, learn more about this from. So that we've given you that in the chapter if anybody wants to read around a little bit more of this. So the whole idea of being different ways in the world that we spoke about earlier, how physical education can promote that, being more time in nature, having a sensitivity and appreciation for the value and commit to its protection, being a greater emphasis on things like active travel, traveling by foot, by bicycles, scooters, rollerblades, whatever it might be, and the positive environmental knock-on effect. Christy's nodding madly. If anybody follows her on Twitter, it's nothing but her on her rollerblades or her bike. We must mention the bike. So these physical education activities can be presented in lots of ways that emphasize and promote, again, the personal responsibility, attention and care for others. And I'm talking about my pet thing, which is teaching social personal responsibility, and also about the environment. So really, I've kind of given you a very quick overview of the 4 possibilities for physical education and a vision for them. And we ask the readers why, and again, as I said at the start, their positionality in the light of reading the chapter. Now, we know the chapter, when Vicky and Jez asked us to look at it, a part of the chapter was about the challenges that teachers have. And I don't think those challenges have changed. We still have a variety of different places and spaces to teach in, and the logistics and practicalities of organising learning in these environments can be very challenging, particularly for the NQT. And then the selection of materials, the progression, the consolidation of learning. We don't have it here in Ireland, but I know you do in the UK. The assessment, the attainment targets, and other things that you might have to do in assessment. So these are all very much challenges and complex, but they're not difficult and they're not impossible. And I think that's really, really important to remember. So they have a thing to remember is each of these possibilities have a common positioning of the child at the centre of the process, and in different ways accommodates their background, their needs and their interest. And I think that will be the key to what the teacher's vision and purpose and what they want from PE. And having a vision for learning really matters. I leave you with that final comment on the chapter. So thanks a million, Vicky, and thanks, Jez, for inviting me along. And I think my colleague Deirdre has popped in the background there. I can see a little emblem, so I'm not sure if Deirdre has popped in as well. So hopefully she caught a little bit of that as well.
Deirdre, did you want to say anything, Deirdre? Oh. No. Are you there, Deirdre? Okay, well,
Hello.
there she is.
Sorry, my buttons weren't working. Yeah, no, just I heard what Maura was saying. Excellent job, Maura. Thanks for that. And just to say, yeah, we're delighted that you gave us the opportunity to write and to build on what the authors of the previous version of the chapter had written about. So thank you for that. And I guess, you know, we talked about 4 different possibilities for the future, and we talked about which one it should be and which one to pick, but I guess we hold the position that there's definitely an opportunity and maybe a necessity to pick. So we might leave it there. Thank you very much, and thanks again for inviting us.
Thanks, Deirdre. And just to add, I think Deirdre and Maura were given a really tough challenge because we gave them a chapter that wasn't theirs and they completely rethought it. It wasn't just a revision, it was a whole-scale rewrite because of all the things I listed that had happened over the 10 years. It was a substantial task. So they'd inherited something that wasn't theirs. And I remember the first time I read it, I thought, this is changing my thinking on the subject than what has happened over however many years. Especially the environmental, the nature of, is the subject bigger than the subject, and how do we address that? So thank you so much for giving me personally something to really think about, and obviously to all the readers. So thank you both, and thanks Deirdre for coming. I know you've had a super busy afternoon. Okay, I believe we're moving on to Christy now. Is that okay? Can you hear us right, Christy?
Yes, hello. I'm going for a slightly shorter version. Moira was super epic and super awesome. I'm sorry, my version's going to be a little shorter. I had the privilege of going for take 2. I made it to round 2. Thank you for having me. But Jez, Vicky, we need a round 3. Some of my physical activity stuff has been updated with new guidelines. So could we go through round 3, please? Yes, please. Thank you. Or count me in for round 3 is what I'm saying. I had the joy of looking at placing an importance on health and physical activity, which for those of you who do know me, it's a small passion of mine in terms of physical activity, and you'll see the sneaky way that I managed to get cycling as the happiest form of transport into the book chapter. So for those of you who have already highlighted that and spotted that, good job. But it was really cool to be able to come back to the chapter and look at what had changed and the main focus of what is physical activity and what are our main health focuses for our children now. The change in particular was we've got new guidelines for our under 5s, which we never had before 2019. Our under 5s had been totally forgotten. So that was a pretty awesome kind of addition to be able to talk about from a physical development into a Key Stage 1 physical education point of view. We still are very vague about what is physical activity. At some point, we might actually get a little bit more help for our teachers, but hopefully this chapter helps them along the way. It also allowed me to highlight some of the forgotten voices. So it allowed me to ask a few more questions that I probably wasn't brave enough to ask when we went for version 1. But this one, thank you for the freedom to pose the question of, well, why are our intellectual disability children forgotten? Why are they not listened to? Why are our children with disabilities at that time of writing not have physical activity guidelines? We have thankfully got them 2 weeks ago, but they were 3 years late compared to getting the disabled adult physical activity guidelines. Children were just forgotten. They can just do normal stuff, can't they? No is the answer. If anybody was wondering what the answer was. So it also gave me the freedom to actually talk about physical activity and well-being and what had we learned in the last 10 years, and what are we, or what could we implement into schools in terms of approaches, interventions. It also allowed me to question the physical activity interventions that are suggested within the Childhood Obesity Plan 2. They need snappier titles of these plans. But there's supposedly 30 minutes of daily physical activity a day suggested as a recommendation for schools. But it's like questioning, well, what is that? And how should we do that? And what could that be? To actually offer suggestions to help address children's health. And then the last thing that was allowed to have a few questions about was the health side in terms of diet and nutrition, and in particular the forgotten element of diet. There was obviously a theme of me thinking things were forgotten along the way in this chapter, revisiting it, and the idea of the forgotten element of drink, and how can we help our children to actually drink throughout the day, not just have water bottles that sit for most of the term in the corner of the classroom taking up a lot of room. My lovely colleagues over in Ireland, Clara Coppinger and myself, spend a lot of time looking at hydration and drinking, and how can we help support children more. So in a nutshell, we address nutrition, diet, hydration, dehydration, self-esteem, well-being, physical activity levels, how you can get more cycling into your life, keep doing it, intellectual disabilities, disabled physical activity, and physical activity for the under fives. And that's the chapter.
Thanks, Chrissy. Can you see I'm just popping into shot every so often? Yeah, we did catch the fact that your wheels had made it into your chapter. We know.
You'd be disappointed if I didn't, though,
Absolutely,
wouldn't you?
Of course, it wouldn't be a chapter from you, Christy, otherwise. Thank you so much. I know, regardless of what subject you teach, and colleagues in the room who might not be physical education subject teachers anymore, I think anyone can resonate with the importance of the chapter that you've written, and following the pandemic, the health issues that have come from young people through a global pandemic and a lockdown, and there's an obsession clearly that was on physical activity, quite rightly so, but you've picked up some of those forgotten groups and forgotten areas as well. So I think beyond physical education, that chapter will be really crucial for many primary educators. So thank you for that contribution, and for sharing that tonight as well.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And last but definitely not least, the Roehampton posse. Ali, I'm very glad to see the movement wheel is in the background there, returned as it should be. So we're going to hand over to Ali and Emmerich, and Ali and Emmerich were new contributors to the text, and again had inherited a chapter that wasn't theirs to begin with, and completely rearranged and rethought, with a really interesting angle to it. So without further ado, who's going to go first? Ali. Okay, over to you, Ali.
Yeah, I'll start, and just for both myself and Emmerich, we're just delighted to be here. But the reason that I needed to work with Emmerich through this is because we've done so much together here at Roehampton, and I also had the privilege to work through gymnastics with Laurie. And so the original author, Emmerich, and I, we really decided to start from where he left, as in let's embody what's going on and take those aspects. So we've honoured the embodiment from the first rendition, and then we've also taken it back to honour the seminal works of amazing people such as Morrison, way back from the 60s through Laban up to the skill theme approach of movement concepts, and show the currency of that, even though we've gone into an ecological stage of development. From our embodied perspective, we found that a lived awareness of our bodies and how we have body management and body control, those are lovely starting points and entry points for educational gymnastics. And then in order to make it ecological, we thought, actually, why don't we out what children have to either their advantage, or they might have thought their disadvantage. So whatever range of motion they have, whatever strength they have, whatever flexibility, whatever knowledge, let's out that so that they can start in a very confident place. This is where I am. And that then infers pedagogy that takes on that constraint. And the constraint is just, what are you bringing to your PE party? So we've come up with a method that rests upon Newell's constraints theory. Again, a very interesting theory. It lends itself across all areas of movement and development. and developmental movement. And for gymnastics, we just said, what are the constraints for the pupil that the pupil brings to class? And then what are the constraints that we have around the environment? And then as the teachers, then that empowers us as well as the pupils to set tasks that are relevant to us using those constraints. So we've taken a theory and operationalized it in a way that helps children really be empowered of who they are and what they're bringing to that sense of lived gymnastics, bearing in mind that we know it's educational. So we want it not just to be enjoyed for itself, but to set them up for lifelong physical activity, engagement in a variety of other pursuits thereafter. I'll hand over to Emmerich. Thanks, Em.
Thank you. Can I just say a big thank you to Jez and Vicky for taking this forward. It's been a pleasure also working with Laurie Price over the years. He taught me quite a lot when I was here, similar to what Vicky was saying. But I have to say a big thank you for Ali for allowing me to contribute, and I'd say it was contribute by challenging. We'd have these lovely walks and talks and going around and putting the world to right. And basically, my drive is really about inclusion and diversity, and seeing that the embodiment of a child needs to be taken into consideration. How do we make them know what they're doing through how they're feeling about what they're doing? And, we challenge ourselves in regards to that. And I have a personal insight into knowing how one feels and not feeling comfortable. And if you're not feeling too comfortable, why would they engage in physical education? And it's great that we've had Gavin, talking about how do we get everybody to feel. And then we've got Maura talking about now how to embrace and get everyone onto board. So we're all coming to the same point from different angles. My angle is about understanding how a child feels. And if we can understand that, then we're able to engage them and to ensure that they would want to be physically active within our lessons, and also be educated. And I think that was a great point that Maura's identifying, is about the physical and the education. And not every child is going to be enamored to be able to move effectively. As Ali was indicating, we've got to start from where the child's at and build from there, rather than saying this is where you should be. And I think that's the challenge with all teaching. And that's the challenges we're always going to have. And I think it was mentioned right at the outset with Gavin saying we'll never actually get to that pinnacle. However, we have the opportunity to aspire to that pinnacle. And I think going through a point of understanding how they're feeling will enable us to able to deliver a more appropriate curriculum for them. And I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for being here today. And I wish you all well. And hopefully you will get to take snippets out of this book and implement it into your own practices. And I'm going to stop there before I start rambling.
Emmerich, I've missed your ramblings.
I know. Vicky, I miss it all. I miss it all.
I have to say, Emmerich's probably the colleague I've worked with the longest, very much since I started my academic career, and we shared an office for so many years, and very fond memories, Emmerich, of working with you, and it's great to see your voice in that chapter alongside Ali's and bringing those issues to the fore. Really, really important. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I wondered if we could just take a short movement break to the back to top up plates and drinks, and maybe if we just reconvene in about sort of 3 or 4 minutes, and then on the times, if you've got any questions we can put to Gavin, myself, Jez, or Ali, Christy, Emmerich, Deirdre and Maura today, we can put a few questions to them before we finish up. Is that okay? See you in a sec. Are you okay, guys, to hang on for a bit? Are you sure? Go and grab a drink. I would get you one. But...
Latte, thanks, Vicky.
A latte for you, okay.
Hello.
Cake. Hey, Jez, I'll have a cake, thanks.
I'm going to stop recording now, guys. Okay, thank you so much.